Anthony Albanese did record a narrow victory in the Sky News Career Mail Leaders debate. The opposition leader and the Prime Minister squared off for more than an hour, answering questions from undecided voters. Foreign policy, housing affordability and the NDIS were all key features as the leaders traded barbs. To dissect the key moments from last night's debate, we're joined now live by the former Labor Senator Stephen Conroy and the former Victorian Liberal Party President Michael Kroger. Good to see you both. Thank you for your time. Michael, let's start with you. Was there a clear winner?
I thought there was. I thought Morrison was the clear winner, so I must be out of touch with Queensland opinion. He's word perfect. He's a very strong debater. He had depth. What are you doing about housing policy? He had the details. What are you doing to help small business? He had details. I thought he didn't make a mistake. I thought Albo was just hanging on. I mean, obviously the boat issue was a disaster for him, but Albo's just hanging on there. He's got all the lines right, which are, we've got to do something about this, we've got to do something about that. He pads out his answers. He looked credible, but it was more like he got a sympathy award, a participation award from the audience, because he didn't crash and burn, because expectations were so low. People thought, oh, he did all right. He wasn't disastrous. So I think that underlines his vote. But I think if you're an objective observer, you couldn't look at those two and think that Albo won that debate. So I think there was probably sympathy for him that he didn't collapse. So that's how I read last night.
Well, Stephen, I don't know if we can describe you as an objective observer either. You're all both obviously going to be telling your own party lines.
Where did he beat? Where did he beat?
There were 100
on
objective observers.
On what issue?
There were 100 objective observers, Ashley, and they scored it with a narrow win to Albo. I thought Morrison was very good. I actually thought he improved quite a bit from his debates from 3 years ago, proving A, that he was a great campaigner, and B, that he continues to be a great campaigner. But I thought clearly Albo matched him. And independent observers in the gallery also all thought it was pretty much a draw. And the 100 people, they gave a marginal win to Albo. So I think what that showed last night was, despite the predictions, Albo was down for the count. The election was going to be over last night. Albo proved, and he's proved all this week, he's come out firing, he's come out with substance, and he's really showed that he wants to be the next Prime Minister of Australia.
Well, I think avoiding gaffes, avoiding the knockout blow is obviously a key aim from any participant in that sort of forum. Michael Kroger, the closest we probably got to a gaffe was these comments we've been reporting today from the Prime Minister when it came to him saying he felt blessed not to have a child with disabilities. There's been a lot of fallout from that today, probably not the best choice of words from the Prime Minister.
Well, you know what he's trying to say. Scott Morrison's actually a very empathetic person. I'm not saying Albo's not either. I think he is. I think you have to be a successful leader in this country. So he meant absolutely no offence whatsoever. But these comments get jumped on from time to time. I just think last night Morrison showed that he was very strong on detail. And I think that's what people want. They want to know what the future holds. What have you done and what does the future hold? Now, you're going to get these one-off comments during campaigns, but in the end, the long-term substance of what a leader offers is what finally motivates people. And that's why I say I think there's a shy Morrison voter effect in this campaign. I think the polls underestimate his vote as they did in 2019.
When you look at that, Stephen Conroy, in terms of the issues that Labor was focusing on, we saw the debate around the Solomon Islands and the China Pact agreement that we learnt about in detail yesterday. As a former Defence Minister, what is your take on that in terms of how serious it is for Australia and what it says about declining influence of Australia and the US, for that matter, in the Pacific?
It is as serious as it looks. And Paddy Wrong absolutely nailed it. This is the worst foreign policy outcome this country has had since the Second World War. We now have, as a direct consequence, we've got an arrangement with the US that we have a fuel reserve based in the US. So Australia's fuel reserves that the country runs on, okay, we have part of it in the US. It now no longer can be counted on as part of our national fuel reserve because there is no longer the straight, simple sail across the Pacific, dock in Australia situation. Having a Chinese facility which will quickly morph, and don't believe a word China says on this. They promised the world in 2013 and 2014 and 2015 they wouldn't militarise those islands that they were building in the South China Sea, and they did. They've turned them into full-on military bases. So don't believe a word they say when they say that they're not going to put armed forces on the Solomon Islands. We now have a very serious strategic problem. And what I find it really humiliating about this outcome for the country is that in the US alliance, our core and only defence alliance up until AUKUS just recently, we only have one real mission that the Americans rely on us for. That is looking after the South Pacific. I can't tell you how humiliating it was when I read that Kurt Campbell and a key delegation was coming from the US to try and fix what we had failed to fix. And it's not sending a person 5 minutes before midnight on the signing. This is 9 years of failure. Richard Marles was specifically in this portfolio area in the last government, and he was in and out of those Pacific islands almost every day. I literally used to phone him and get the beep, 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 beep. And I go, where are you now? And he'd go, Fiji or Solomon Islands. I mean, he's been in Honiara more times than you and I will ever be in our entire lives. So the previous government understood the mission. The mission was to keep an eye on and keep working with all those the Pacific Island countries. And we have failed miserably. And it's humiliating the Americans are trying to clean up our
nonsense. Listen, Ash, let me just say this. I've never heard a great lot of rubbish from Stephen or Penny Wong yesterday. The Solomon Islands aren't some independent, sort of nation that sort of naively sort of gone from one to the other. Let's be frank about this. I can tell you what Marise Payne and Scott Morrison can't say. This Prime Minister Sogavare, this is his 4th term in office. He's been Prime Minister 3 times before and been tossed out. He's been very anti-Australian for a long time. His history tells you he's been very anti-Australian for a long time. 2 years ago, this character de-recognised Taiwan and recognised China as the legitimate government of the Chinese countries. So he doesn't recognise Taiwan. He did that 2 years ago. This guy has been pro-China for years and years and years, and he's been anti-Australian for years and years and years. The good news is he's only ever lasted in office 3 years before he's been tossed out. So I wouldn't put it past the good people of the Solomon Islands to toss this guy out, as they have on 3 other occasions. This guy comes and goes. He was Prime Minister first 20 years ago. He's anti-Australian, he's pro-Chinese, and I would think the country will turn on him.
That's what the word diplomacy was invented for, Michael, something you've just shown as zero.
Well, Stephen, the bottom line here is diplomacy isn't working. There's no way Marise Payne is going to be able to influence the Solomon Islands if the Americans can't, right? If the Americans can't influence them, there's no way Australia can. You're basically dealing with a Prime Minister who's hostile to this country, right? I'm not involved in diplomacy, so that's why I can tell the viewers of Sky News the history that you haven't heard anywhere else. This guy is not a friend of Australia. He never has been. He's been pro-China. He's been booted out 3 times before, and I would expect him to be booted out again in the not too distant future.
Well, that is certainly not the line we're hearing from the coalition at the moment, Michael Kroger. Interesting to hear your insights.
Correct.
Stephen Conroy, as always, good to see you too. It's great having the band back together. I know that we could continue with this all day, but we do have our reporter who's with Scott Morrison standing by to go live. So we better move on with that, Michael and Stephen. Appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much.